Hey guys, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartledge, and I'm really excited that you have decided to take time out of your busy schedules to come and hang out today. We're really grateful for you tuning in. And if you have been listening to the podcast for a while, we really appreciate this. Thank you so much. Hopefully you have subscribed so that you never miss an episode. But if not, or if you are new to the show, get yourself over to iTunes, Stitcher, animaltrainingacademy.com, or whatever it is you're listening to this podcast on, and hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We are bringing you today's episode on behalf of the Animal Training Academy, or ATA membership. If you like the conversations in these podcasts, then I want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people within the ATA membership area, which you can find out more about over on the ATA website. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web classes, plus a huge library of videos and projects to problem solve different training situations. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group, forums area, and WhatsApp chat groups. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour nerds. Well, we will get started on today's episode where we will be talking to one Sylvia Czarnecki. Sylvia is a professional positive reinforcement-based horse trainer from Germany, working closely with both horses and their trainers via her business Motionclick since 2011. She has written 2 books, the first being specifically about trick behaviour training and the second all about using positive reinforcement with equines. Sylvia delivers clinics, lectures and lessons on force-free horse training, psychology and learning theory. She also runs an online membership program for people who want to dive deeper into these subjects. Sylvia is a certified member of the International Association of Animal Behaviour Consultants, the IAABC, and the Pet Professional Guild, the PPG. Her passion is to help horses and their owners develop a trust-based, force-free partnership rooted in modern and science-based learning. Following the guidelines of effectiveness is not enough, Sylvia starts her programs considering the horse's emotions and uses this to help guide and create a stress-free and non-coercive training atmosphere, with the aim of creating the most positive learning experience for both horses and humans. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Sylvia to the show today. Sylvia, how are you?
Oh, thank you so much, Ryan, for the great introduction. I'm very pleased to talk to you, and it's a great honor for me to join the list of all those important speakers of your podcast.
Oh, it's an honor to have you on this show, and we've known each other for... How long have we known each other for now?
Well,
a couple of years.
I think it's not so long, a year and a half, maybe.
So yeah, excited to, and we've done some stuff together already, so inside the members area on Animal Training Academy, so excited to do this podcast with you today. Let's dive in, eh? We're going to get started with the first question, Sylvia, and that is, can you, for everyone listening, take us back to where you first learned about positive reinforcement animal training and share some of the stories from the first animals you ever trained using it?
Well, to be honest, I couldn't fix it all with the clicker at the beginning, as I was a very unexperienced trainer in pure positive reinforcement, and there weren't any people around who can help me with that. I joined a mailing list with a handful of people in Germany who began clicker training with a horse, and I remember it was, 16 years ago, no one does clicker training with horses. And so I began mixing it with techniques from pressure and release training, which was in the beginning working very well, as I thought previously, but it doesn't feel good at all. And especially it doesn't feel right. So I always try to improve my skills to get more into pure positive reinforcement work. And I always was the strange woman who uses clicker at some of the serious Pirelli clinics with natural horsemanship. And, I could fix a lot of the issues we have had in the past, but not all. And as I wasn't feeling very well with this approach, I quit mixing quadrants after a while and reteach a lot of behaviors just with positive reinforcement, put all the way the aversives, and step into a completely new beginning. And this was very, very hard for me. But it was good to make this experience because, well, I think it was some kind of pioneer work in Germany, as I was always very public with my stuff, and we all are pioneers on working with positive reinforcement with horses. And so I've come the same long way with positive reinforcement as most of the horse owners that tried clicker training. And I struggle with the same things. I was challenging, especially without teaching and less information, but important to understand the process when people switch to R+. Well, I've made a lot of mistakes myself, and I had to solve them myself, and I need to develop better working techniques. And with my own horse, I have to say I'm still suffering from some of the side effects like poison cues and all those poisoned environment, like working on the riding court or something like that, circling around. So all the stuff I've taught him with negative reinforcement. So for him, I've better done it right from the start, but always the first horse phenomenon that those horses have to go through to teach people what to do and what better left behind. So today I'm following a more ethical approach where horses and emotions and needs were put in the first place to create, a trust-based relationship with their human.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Sylvia. And I have had the pleasure of getting to know online, because I haven't been to Germany, Tarek over the last year and a half. So we normally share photos on the podcast write-up and link them when they're shared on social media. So I am thinking we'll share an image of you and Tarek. And so people listening can get a view, because Tarek is absolutely stunning.
Thank you. I will let him know.
he just looks so cool. He's an amazing looking horse. And so you were back in a while ago going to like Pirelli clinics, you were saying, and you were the strange woman using the clicker.
Yes.
How did that feel at the time, and what kind of reaction did you get?
Well, most people were laughing at me. And also the instructor aren't very pleased with that. So they weren't very happy with my approach, teaching him stuff. But they can't do anything because, well, it works. So I have a draft horse working in the upper class of Pirelli work. So this is mostly a class where, normal horses will have a lot of time to get there. So most of the people are quite impressed how much he can do because, well, he's a very big horse and he doesn't look very elegant when you first saw him. But when he gets stronger and he has the right muscles and he will have the right expressions, he looks quite impressive, and he did a great job, even it wasn't all positive reinforcement based. So,
and you said that you made a lot of mistakes along the way. And one thing that I admire in you, having got to know you over the last year and a half, is your desire to learn and your passion for learning. You're out there teaching people about positive reinforcement of horses. But when we did a web class on snake training last month, you were one of the most active participants, getting really excited about it. So can you talk, just before we move on, just tell people what your thoughts are on the importance of being okay with making mistakes, maybe, and always learning?
Yeah, when we're working with horses, we need to take mistakes not as a mistake, just as information. And I think with humans it's quite the same. So when we recognize we have doing something wrong, the moment we have done it, we don't know that it was wrong. So we sometimes need the experience to recognize that we have to do things different. But it needs a lot of knowledge to recognize that something is not going well. And one of my issues I had in the past was not to know the body language of the horse. So I always thought the horse was fine with what I'm doing because he performs, and I haven't seen I haven't seen his face expressions or something like that. So I don't want to judge myself based on that, because I can only do it better when I know it better. So it's always a development of knowledge and experience that leads us to be a better trainer for our animals, and at least for ourselves too.
So we only know what we know.
Yes.
And we can only do what we do.
Yeah.
But we should always keep learning.
Right.
Love it. And you are the application of what we've just talked about. You walk the walk and talk the talk. So thanks for sharing that. And I've already said this once, and I do this every podcast, but I'm going to say it again. Just before we move on to the next question, bring everyone up to where we are in 2018 and tell us a little bit about Motionclick and where people can go to find out about what you're up to now.
So my business Motionclick is about teaching horses and people positive reinforcement techniques. And I also run a huge blog on the website where I share information about training and horse behavior, learning theory, and also about trick training and all the other stuff people need to know when working with the horses or start positive reinforcement. You can also get a booklet about starting positive reinforcement horse training for free on my blog when you register for the newsletter. And I think especially the website is a very important part of my business, because this is where it all starts. I think it was in 2001, so it's now 17 years ago. Yeah. So I'm just sharing information about trick training like I do it before, but of course on another level of knowledge. And most people come through my website to contact me as a trainer. And I'm writing a book in 2011, the first one, and then it gets bigger. And then I quit my normal day job and working as a full-time positive reinforcement trainer, which I just love to be and never want to do something else. So yeah, a lot of my business is online. Not only, I'm just giving clinics in Germany and Austria, and well, of course I can go to English-talking countries. But the online membership is quite an important part, which getting bigger and bigger, because we can connect people from every area in Germany or other German-speaking countries. And I think it's important to connect people, as we are there are not many trainers in our area to teach people, and people need to know where they can go if they have questions or issues with training. And so I try to be they're a good partner for them, and also a good teacher to help them through the most important time, I think, when you switch to positive reinforcement training.
So wonderful. And I love hearing about people's behavioral odyssey. So thank you very much for sharing, Sylvia. Moving forward, I would really like to get your input on, and potentially we've touched on some of this to a certain degree so far, but really love to get your input on what you think some of the challenges people face are when they're first starting out using positive reinforcement to train their horses.
I think the most challenging thing is to be open-minded, as we have so many ongoing myths and outdated information in traditional horse work. And even in newer concepts, these are more based on people's belief than scientifically proved. So the first thing you need to do is trust in the science that it works. And I've spent so many times on thinking you can't do everything with positive reinforcement and blame the technique and the animal instead of working on a more ethical way and getting the knowledge to do this. So basically you can do everything with positive reinforcement. It's more than we are restrained by our own way of thinking, and we need to recover our gut feeling, which is often falsified due to our own training history. So I think this is a really important thing when you want to start positive reinforcement training, that you, trust in the science. And the second thing is to spend the time to get informations about it before you start with your horse. So the first behaviors you taught the horse with positive reinforcement are very important for the future, as they are often get stuck into the animal's mind. So begin the work with some special trick is not always the best idea. And I always refer to 3 basic qualities of clicker training. So the first thing is conditioning to a marker signal, and the second thing is polite manners, especially with food, and the second thing is relaxation. So in behavioral terms, that means teaching the horse the meaning of the marker signal, so mostly by giving them an easy exercise. You can use touching a target with its nose while having a barrier between you and the horse. So it's quite a good idea to prevent unwanted behavior and let both, so the horse and the human, feeling comfortable and safe. And while doing that, you can directly train the horse to be polite, which means standing facing forward with all feet on the ground, not barging into the fence or the human, and waiting for the target to be presented and then just click for the behavior itself. So standing facing forward, all feet on the ground. And the last thing is relaxation, which is especially at the beginning important to let the horse feel safe and able to learn under good conditions. So this can be reached by low-value reinforcers. I think this is very important, as most people use very high-valued food in the beginning, and a satiated horse, so free hay available during the session, and really short sessions like 3 minutes, and then give them a break, drink something and eat some hay before you start again. So I think these are the basic qualities when you start with positive reinforcement. And, the last thing I want to mention is to take every unwanted behavior or even a mistake, which is only a mistake for us humans, just as information. So for the horse, there's no wrong in their behavior. There's no definition of wrong in their brain. So every behavior the horse is showing up is right for the horse, and we need to focus on the information we get through it. So why is the unwanted behavior more desirable than the behavior we like to see, and how can we change that? Which antecedents in the first place leads to that, and what's in for the horse for changing the behavior in a way we like to see by the horse?
So I think we will call this podcast episode, we'll call it "A Mistake is Just Information." What do you think?
This is great.
Because having talked to you a lot over the last year and a half, that's something that I remember you saying quite a lot. That's something that's quite important to you, isn't it?
It is. But I have to say, I think it's not developed by me. So the first time I've heard it was from one of my teachers, Katja Frey, from Germany, who is, normally a dog trainer and working with positive reinforcement. But I've did a lot of stuff with her. And I think it was in one of my chicken camps where I first heard the term, and this really stuck into my mind as it is so important. But also Susan Friedman talk a lot about this topic at all.
And some great references there, and thank you for saying that and making sure that credit is given where it's due. One thing you said there, that for people just starting out with positive reinforcement, you mentioned that it's important to recover your gut feeling.
Yeah.
What do you mean by this?
I think many things, especially punishment, is justified by our gut feeling. So I heard many people I heard many people saying that they're doing things because it feels right for them. So they mostly have, a wrong gut feeling developed because they strongly believe in things that are not, sometimes scientifically proven. So by the traditional horsework, we will be taught that it's okay to punish the horse. And when you first, as a little child experienced what to do with horses, when someone asks you just to hit your horse harder or to kick them in the belly, you will quite not do this in the beginning, and you will ask, why should I do that? Because it doesn't feel right. But after a few years, when you are in traditional horsework, most people find this quite normal. And when you're in that kind of training style for many years, and some of my students are not just 15 or 16 and have a lot of training history themselves, they really need to recover their gut feelings, because it's hard to describe, because I think when we're switching to positive reinforcement, we believe that everything we will be doing feels right, and this isn't true. So when we are doing things different than we are doing it for 20 years or longer, they won't feel right at the moment. When you stop punishing your hands for your horse for showing unwanted behavior, like just pinning the ears when you're getting near to them, it doesn't feel right for many people, because they feel like they have to punish it to make it happen again. And this was what I mean by recovering your gut feelings, because I think the natural gut feeling, or the intuition we have in the beginning, is sometimes gone or falsified by our beliefs.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm sure maybe there's people listening to this podcast who are thinking about their own training right now, and the thought is, I need to recover my gut feeling. Or maybe there's people who have gone through that experience already and are just resonating with what you're saying, having experienced it themselves. Can you potentially provide any input on what to do when you're in that situation? How do we recover our gut feeling? It's a point of retraining ourselves, is it?
Well, how? I think you need knowledge. And like I said in the beginning, you need to trust in the science. And it always helps to talk with other people who made this experience before. And I think what always helps is to think about the expectations we have in the past when we're thinking about horses, especially when we are a child or when we are younger. Because when we get back to this stage of development of our love for horses, I think we haven't had the picture in our mind to restrain the horse with bits and spurs and whips. So to recover our gut feelings, it can help to get back to where it all starts. So when we first experience our love for the horse, and when we get back to this stage of knowledge, there were no force or restraining. It was just the boundary with the horse and the human. So we need to think if what we are doing now is actually that what we want to have when we think of horses in the past, and normally it isn't. So when we think of horses, we have just the horse and us in a nice and polite environment, respect and trust. These are the things we remember when we think of horses in the early stages, and not thinking on punish them and restraining them for getting the behavior we want to have. And what always impresses people is when I ask them, is there any experience you remember that you're feeling quite good with? And when you think back to this, something you won't redo again. And I think every one of us has this experience where we are thinking, oh my God, how can I do this? I would never do this again. And when we are actually do this, it just feels right. So we need to think about, can we always trust our gut feeling? And we need to think about that we are learning as the horse does too. So behaviors that were reinforced in the past often feels right for us because they were reinforced many times. But when we change our behaviors, there is no reinforcement history for new behaviors. So we need to recover all the stuff. We need to reteach ourselves, and we need to give us the time to make new experiences and watch our horses a little bit closer. And I think this is quite a mixture of our own knowledge, and this is something we can do without working with the horse, spending time on getting knowledge, talking to people who have experience on that, and then making our own experience by observing the horse behavior, observing what we doing ourselves, and then put it all together to get new behaviors for us and our horses.
And so in this journey, what is the importance, do you think, of finding yourself a role model, a good mentor, or a tribe to help you along that journey?
I think to have people with knowledge that you can trust is really important, as you can't know everything from the start. And there's a lot of education material nowadays, and it really helps to use them. But nothing is more worth than having someone you can ask, especially someone who can come to your place and assist you. And sadly, and especially in the horse world, there aren't a lot of people who teach this, and most of the trainers are still unexperienced themselves or having just implemented in their normal work. And this is not always very helpful when you're teaching people new stuff. So it's very good to have a community of people for exchange and sharing experiences and supporting each others, especially people that are in the same situation. Because it can be very hard if you haven't someone like-minded like you around you. And it's always the same in the horse world, like in other environments. Ask 3 people and you get 5 different opinions. And as food reward, and especially clicker training, isn't very accepted in the horse world yet, everybody has to say something about it, and mostly nothing useful. So you need really people who support you to withstand this and build your own opinion when you learn to swim against the stream.
Hey, fantastic. Thank you very much for all of that, Sylvia. Just to backtrack a little bit, we were talking about challenges people face when first starting out using positive reinforcement, and you offered some tips for people about some simple things that they can do to get started. A big consideration potentially for someone wanting to start is the learning history of the horse. What difference can you explain to people, or have you found, between training a crossover horse, so one where punishment and lots of potentially incorrect negative reinforcement or bad timing had been implemented in minimal amounts of positive reinforcement? So a horse that's coming from that space versus one that's, for lack of a better way of explaining it, had very minimal learning history. It's a clean state, or it's been trained with positive reinforcement up until now. What are the big differences people need to think about between these two different situations?
This is a very complex and huge topic, so I try to make it as short as possible. I think the first learning experiences in the early stages of the horse and building the relationship are very important to each individual. So it's not that all training with negative reinforcement is totally bad if it's done right, but I've experienced that there are even less trainers for good traditional work than with positive reinforcement. And this is, in my opinion, because they have often a different understanding of the horse and their learning and behavior. So teaching is often based on systematical punishment as a default response for unwanted behaviors. So the horse often learns to accept what happens instead of having a voice and participate in training. And I don't want to judge every approach, but it leaves the horse with a lot of unpleasant emotions, and it's quite hard to restart these horses, and sometimes it's more difficult if they were taught with a combination of negative reinforcement and food reward, as the food itself can be poison too, and put the horse in a state of anxiety. And I remember a lot of people that thought food doesn't work for my horse. And I think this is one of the issues, because food doesn't work for the horses because the food itself is poisoned. And using punishment and reward in the same place creates more trust issues, as the horse never knows if it comes to reinforcement or punishment after a cue. And also the human partner needs to learn and wouldn't be clear in the beginning of the responses. And this often causes a relapse into old habits and wanted or unwanted, but makes it quite difficult for the horse to trust the new approach. So it's often a very fragile construct, but depending on so many factors like the age of the horse and the amount and the strength of punishment and, well, lots of things. But I can't recommend to make a clear cut in general, because you will create a lot of confusion for the horse too when you just take away all the cues and all the, well, known behaviors, what you will probably do when you make a clear cut and just do everything with positive reinforcement after that. And even if you install new cues, some of them will always be like, some of them will always be poisoned like the human itself. So the one who offers the punishment after unwanted behavior is mostly the human. They need to learn to trust again. So, well, sadly, I think often the human and also the food is the most poisoned cue in the environment of the horse. And this is quite difficult to fix for both of them. And, well, I always compare it with someone who was forced to start dancing without being asked, and under the condition that something unpleasant will happen if you won't go to dance. And imagine a teacher that threatens you if you're doing something wrong. Even he explains what to do and rewards you from time to time with a break and kind words. The threats and the unpleasant consequences will always stuck in your mind and will stop you from enjoying it and doing it for yourself. And imagine the unpleasant consequences will be painful. You will be maybe immediately stop dancing if you've grown up and never look back to that. And then maybe one day your partner asks you to join a dancing class with him. Maybe you will do so for him as a favor, and because he lets you know he will never force you to continue if it doesn't feel good for you. And maybe you learn to enjoy it because he's very gentle and the teacher is good and everything is explained well, but it just need one forceful action like yelling at you or force you to go to destroy all this trust. And it doesn't only destroy the joy in dancing, it also have effects on your relationship between you and your partner. So you need to be very careful when you're transferring your work from punishment-based training to positive reinforcement. And this is quite challenging, even if you are experienced in working with positive reinforcement, and especially if you are new in this kind of training. And I think this is completely different when you're teaching a horse with positive reinforcement right from the start. A horse that has learned to interact with the environment and have a trust-based relationship has a completely different learning strategy and a completely different strategy to cope with its environment. They are open-minded and curious, trustful, and they really want to learn. And this has a huge boost effect on as each learning experience creates more reinforcers, more positive emotions, more positive experience. And I think it's like a reverse funnel that starts with little and gets wider and wider as you will have tons of positive things in it, and each participates from the previous one. And it's a little bit like cell division. Yeah, I think these are the most differences between these types of starting a horse or restarting a horse.
I love your metaphors. What advice do you have for people? Because I'm going to guess, and you tell me what you think, Sylvia, that there is a significant amount of horses that are in the position of coming from a background that involved some degree of punishment.
Mm-hmm. I think what mostly works is to start in a new setup that is clearly different from your normal training approaches, like putting the horse in another environment, like protected contact is something most horses never experience. So if you have a barrier between you and your horse, it's not only that you are safe, it's mostly that the horse feels safe themselves. And you can, like I said in the beginning, prevent unwanted behavior, but you can also put the horse in an emotional state that where learning can happen under completely new conditions. So this is a thing I would normally do when I start a horse with positive reinforcement. But, like scientists would say, it always depends on. So each individual needs a different approach sometimes, and especially you need to look under which circumstances horse and human can work together. So this would be different if your horse is standing in an open stable and you have lots of time and space to do whatever you want, or if you live in a strictly restrained environment like many horses in Germany would do, living in a small box of 4 to 4 meters, which is quite less space for them. I can't completely answer this question, but I think it's important to make clear when they can experience just positive reinforcement. Yeah, I think the most important thing is to make clear when you use the clicker, when you use your, I think, normal approach to work with the horse. And I also think that it can make sense to quit some of the work if it's really restraining or stressful for the horse, or you will use a lot of punishment and that. And I think another important tip is not to use punishment with food. So this is a really well-known approach to handle food anxiety or unwanted behavior with food, to punish the horse for being unpolite. And I think this is the worst thing you can do when you restart a horse that comes from normal training approaches, that you use punishment by trying to teach them polite manners. So this really needs to be clear for the horses, that no punishment, especially positive punishment, will happen in this environment, and that they are completely free to go if something is, there is something they can't cope with. So I always tend to have free hay available. And this is another reason for the barrier between me and the horse. If something is wrong, or the horse doesn't understand something, the horse is free to leave and grab a bit of hay. So this is my information that I need to think what happens in the first place and what I need to do to fix this problem for the horse. I think this is very important.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks so much for that, Sylvia. We are going to move on to the next question, but there's just one more thing I really wanted to talk about, because you mentioned it a little bit earlier, and it's something that I've seen you mention in blog posts and video shares online that you share in the Animal Training Academy community and via Motionclick, and that was the value of using low value food.
Yeah.
Can you just, and you kind of talked about having hay available in the environment there as well. Can you just build on this a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next question?
I think in the beginning, when we are starting to teach the horse new behaviors with positive reinforcement, I think one of the most problematic things is that people using high value treats, so normal treats like you can buy at the store, are with much sugar and things that we don't want to have in the horse. But of course, they are very tasty for the horse, and so they create a need for the horse to grab it. And especially if you don't have any other food available, like hay in their environment to get when something, doesn't work for them, you will take away a lot of choice from the horse. We always think that because we are using food and the horse is free to leave, everything is voluntary, and the horse always have a choice. But the horse is an animal that always like to have food around, and especially high value food creates a lot of need for the horse to try things to get the food. So when we use high valued food, it can create a lot of stress for the animal. And even if we have hay next to the horse will mostly try to get the food we have in our pockets. So when we use low value food, we can prevent stress from the horse. We give them more choice, especially when the value of the available food and the value you use to reward the horse is not so different. So I often use hay as free available, and alfalfa or hay cobs, something like that, to reward the horse. So there's just a little bit different in the value of the food. And this helps to create relaxation, which is very important in the beginning.
Yeah, I really like that. And similar to things we've discussed in the past on previous episodes, I know Shirag talked a little bit about this as well, having items available in the environment. So the dog can, well, he was talking about dogs, you're talking about horses. The dog can communicate that actually engaging with you is being chosen over the other items. And Denise Fenzi talked about this idea of choice with regards to animals being able to leave or not, because they just want what you have so much. That they might not actually be choosing to participate, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? Have I said that well?
Absolutely. So I always try to prevent, I'm not getting the word in my mind, avoidance approach conflict. Yeah. So the horse wants something very badly, but want to avoid something too, and it puts the horse into a conflict, not to leave even if it doesn't feel good for the horse. And I think this is really a problem when people start working with positive reinforcement or just using food in their normal training sessions.
Yeah, maybe that comes back to trusting your gut feeling as well. Do you think people kind of know that? Do you think that's kind of obvious, or do you think that's something that comes with experience and time?
I think you need a little bit of experience for that. And well, even if you have experience, this doesn't prevent you from thinking that because you're using positive reinforcement and food reward, it has to be always a positive learning experience for the horse. And I think not because we are using positive reinforcement is always have to be a positive learning experience for the horse. We need to think a bit more deeper in that stuff, as using food or positive reinforcement is only the half of the way.
Yeah, really interesting conversation, and looking forward to diving into this topic more in up-and-coming episodes and within the Animal Training Academy community, and with you, the listener, if we ever meet. But feel free to comment. You can go to the podcast right up on animaltrainingacademy.com and add comments in there. I'll post this on the Animal Training Academy Facebook page, and you can comment on Facebook or on Sylvia's page as well when you post it on there. Great conversation. We're going to move on now to the next question. That was a lot of fun to learn about, but I love your metaphors, and I said that earlier, and I really do. I think you've got a great way of bringing these concepts into experiences that we could relate to. And one that I really like of yours is viewing your relationship with your animal as you might with your best friend versus one you might have with a good boss. Can you talk about this metaphor for us and what it means?
Oh yeah, I really like that one too. because I think the relationship of most people with their horses is more like a good boss and a staff member. And if you're building your relationship based on some kind of ranking concept, which not always means you use a lot of punishment, it will always have the taste that you're not in the role to decide against this one. And you can build trust and empathy between you and your boss, and you can also have a good glass of wine with him. But at the end, he is the decision maker, and even if he asks you about your opinion, this doesn't mean that he will never accept your decisions or suggestions, but only if he decides that this is acceptable or at least good for him or the company. And this relationship affects also your relationship outside the company. And as you will never feel free to do everything you want or express your feelings as they appear, because you never know if this will affect your working relationship. And this is not what I want for my relationship with the animal. I want to be a companion or a friend for my horse. I want them to be honest and express their feeling, and I will never tell him they are not right, as I fully believe feelings can't be wrong and need to be expressed and also be recognized and taken serious by someone. And I want to be a guide that help the horse to cope with a strange and mostly unnatural environment, which is very difficult for the horse. And I want to learn fear-free and by rewarding good decisions, not by punish them for bad decisions. So that doesn't mean that bad stuff never happen. As we all know, we are not living in a sterile environment. But if the horse doesn't expect bad things from you and you'll give him choice and at the one hand and solutions at the other hand, they will decide to go with you. Even bad stuff will happen sometimes. And I really like the idea of the trust account, like Susan Friedman always mentioned, where you put a lot of good stuff in and create something like a dispo credit. And if you withdraw something with bad experiences like punishment, it can easily be filled as long as there's enough buffer, and it will just have little effect on the relationship as it won't be associated with the human itself. And well, mostly, to be honest. So I think the short version is, when I go to my horse, I don't want to be the boss that wants to work for him. I want my horse to feel like his best buddy knocks on the door asking to come out and play. And even if he decides today is not the time to play, I will accept this without feeling bad about this, because well, we don't know what's going on in their environment 22 hours a day when we are not around. So sometimes it's just not the time to play.
And so when we're thinking about the bad boss, we've got someone who we can have a glass of wine with, we can have a joke with, but when it comes to making decisions, the boss is potentially going to decide things that aren't so great for you, because it's good for them or the company. Now, when we think about our training with our animals, what is the part of our training that, in this metaphor, is the company? Is it our training goals? So we might make decisions that are bad for the animals based on what we want and our training goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think because we have expectations from the horse, and many people put their own needs first and then maybe ask the horse. But I always or often see the phrase to ask the horse a question. But if there's only one answer available and this answer is is something you want to hear, this isn't very a conversation. So it's just, well, asking the horse but doesn't want to know what he really thinks. And I think this is something that can easily happen in the boss mode. So the boss like to make you feel comfortable as long as you will work for him. But if something isn't, well, in their interest, they put their needs first, no matter how the horse or the staff member is feeling. And this really puts away choice, which we like to have in a trust-based relationship. And choice is also the choice to say no to something and needs to be accepted by the other one.
I think we can all relate to situations where we have been there with someone who is in boss mode. And I like that, boss mode. So you mentioned to me when we were getting ready for this podcast that you wanted to build on this idea and talk about the difference between how we can best use the horse versus, so that's one idea, versus helping the horse to cope with the difficulties of the human world.
Yeah, I think having a horse, to use the horse for fun or for your own expectations is the wrong approach to having a horse. I think we shouldn't define the benefit of the horse by their use, as they are all individuals that need to be respected for what they are, and not every horse is the same. And I think we really have the problem in the horse world that we think that every horse is made to be ridden. And when we look back to the history of the horse, they would be ridden for quite a long time, but their body isn't made for that. And I'm not against riding, of course. I'm fine when someone wants to ride the horse and having their own goals. But I think if we have a horse to use it, it's not the right approach to have a horse. We should have them to enjoy ourselves spending times together. And I think this is an ethical thing, because we need to think if it's okay to own an individual and use it for our own purposes and to fill our own needs and expectation. Yeah.
That's a big question that goes obviously beyond the horse world. Into the dog world and into the zoo world and into every area where animals have relationships with humans, and even wild animals. All right, maybe put the brakes on this one for this podcast episode. But great information. I know. I mean, these ideas are going to be so valuable for so many people. So, thank you so much for sharing so far, Sylvia.
You're welcome.
The next area I want to talk about, and we've already started this conversation now, is incorporating positive reinforcement and choice and control into riding our horses. Can you walk us through, or build upon, I should say, rather, your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, I'm not riding anymore, but this isn't because I feel riding is bad. I'm just feeling not comfortable by doing it again because my horse has so much experiences. And I think I haven't the weight to ride my horse anymore. But I'm not against riding, but like I said, if we have a horse to use it, we need to think if we are right by using it in the way we want them to use. So it's okay to spend time on working on our goals. And I think most people have a horse to ride it, but we need to do it in a way the horse can participate in having a voice that will be heard. And I think one of the problems we have to deal is when we are riding horses, even if we are doing it right with positive reinforcement, that horses aren't made for that. And this doesn't mean that they can't be ridden, but we need to be very aware of the fact that riding can cause damage on the body of the horse, especially if we use aversives. Well, of course, we can do a lot of things to prevent damage on this, but we can't be sure if it doesn't damage the body of the horses if we ride in a way, because like I said, when we talk about learning, we can't do it right if we know we have to do something different. But while learning, mistakes affect the environment and also the horse. And as long as we try to ride in a physical way, it will have impact on the horse's body. So I think this is really an issue in thinking about riding horses. It's like I can teach a person to handle many weight on his back, and maybe he can cope with this the whole life, but maybe not. We doesn't know this in the first place. Maybe this cause of damage will appear years later. This is the first thing. And the second thing is that we are so used to ride horses that we, in my opinion, riding too much horses that shouldn't be ridden because of their physical build or their condition, or at least because of their emotional welfare. People were bullied because they don't ride the horses. And I think this is really strange, because we are the ones to make horses being ridden and to let it be normal to ride horses. But this is not, well, the thing they are properly made for. And we can also spend a lot of time and doing stuff with the horses without being ridden. Ridden can be a part of having a relationship, and for some horses it is helpful too. So some horses really like to go out in the fields. Some horses like to exercise, but how can we know when we teach them with restraining and with physical punishment? So when we're teaching horses to be ridden, I think it's a good idea to use positive reinforcement to give them a way to communicate that something isn't, well, feeling good for them. Because to prevent damage from their own body is the first thing they would do if we're using punishment. And even if we use food rewards, we can't be sure that it's in the interest of the horse. Because when the horse expects punishment for not offering a behavior, it will always choose to offer the behavior instead of, having a treat at the end. So, yeah, very difficult topic. I think we can start a new podcast on that. But I think these are my important thoughts on that. So we can ride horses. I'm not against riding horses, but we need to find ways to give them a voice, because riding itself can be very restraining for the horse.
So can you build on that any more about things people can potentially start to implement or start to think about, start to have conversations about? How can we offer them more choice, more control?
Well, one thing is, I think really one thing is to use low-value food, but of course this is not the only way. We can teach all the behaviors from the ground with positive reinforcement and then transferring it into the saddle. This is the approach I'm mostly following when I start horses under the saddle, or assisting people to start horses under saddle. And I think you can use something like a cooperation signal or a start button, like teaching the horse to stand next to the mountain block. So when you're teaching the horse to be ridden, you first will teach them all the behaviors you like to have in the saddle. And then, of course, you need a lot of training for saddling or make them comfortable to wear the tag you need to have them. And then teaching them to come to the mountain block and teach them how it feels when something comes from behind or slightly bent over the horse. And when it comes to go into the saddle, you can always start on the mountain block. So the horse learns, every time I come to the mountain blocks, the human will mount me and step into the saddle. So you will, if you use positive reinforcement for training in the saddle, you will see if the horse hesitates to move to the mountain block or just don't go to the mountain block and doing something else or going away from you. So I think this is a good idea to start horses riding with positive reinforcement and give them a way to say, no, today it's not the time to being ridden, if you do it in the same order. But, you need to be aware that the horse is used to be heard. So if the horse says no, that means no. That doesn't mean, but I want to ride either, but I think we will have fun in the fields. If the horse doesn't move to the mountain block, it means mostly he don't want him to. He don't want you to mount. So this needs to be accepted. And I think this is quite challenging if you restart a horse and the horse decides not to be ridden anymore. It took a long time to recover from these things. And if you're giving the horse a choice, you need to be aware that the answer the horse will be given to you is maybe not the answer you expect or you want to hear. Yeah.
That's challenging for people to accept.
Yes, it is.
So if you want to learn more about start buttons, I think potentially some people might not know where to start or might not have heard about that before. I mean, go back and listen to a podcast episode with Ava Bertelsen where we talk about that. With regards to asking permission and getting horses to go to mounting blocks and start buttons, do you potentially have a video we could share about this, Sylvia, in the podcast write-up?
Yeah, I have a student which is quite good in that, and I will ask him to give you permission to use this.
Cool.
I think he will.
So if you listen to this podcast and we've included this part, that's because we do have permission. And you can head to the write-up on animaltrainingacademy.com to check that out.
Great.
Hey, sadly we are nearly at the end, but that's okay because we're also heading into one of my favourite parts of the podcast show, and this is story time. Silva, can you please share with everyone listening 2 or 3 stories from your experience training horses and animals so far and some of the important lessons that these have taught to you along the way?
The first thing that comes into my mind when I think about experience that are very impressive for me is trailer loading my own horse, Tarek. We have never bad experience with driving, but with loading itself. And he don't have a good start with loading because I did several mistakes and I asked the wrong people as I was experienced enough. And I thought this can't be fixed with positive reinforcement because I tried luring him and I tried to reward him to moving towards the trailer or going on the ramp, something like that. But he was too afraid to go, as I remember. But I couldn't find another solution than asking someone who uses pressure and release techniques. So one of our first experiences with trailer loading was that he learned to pull on the rope and just walk away. So, and if you have a draft horse, which was nearly, well, even in the younger ages, about 500 kilo, with a very short neck, it is easy to pull the rope over his shoulder and just move away from the trailer. So, and well, this is something he would really use as the last exit. So even today, if something is really stressful for him and I can't fix this issue, it can happen that he just go away as he learns that this always works as an approach. So be really careful to prevent mistakes, because some of the experiences the horse will make are really stuck into the animal's mind and will pop out if you're not aware of them, and especially if you bring them in a situation that is scary or where they are afraid or nearly in panic, because this turns to be maybe their default behavior when it comes to flight response. But what is most important on the trailer loading is that this was one of the behavior I thought for a long time. There are still some things you can't fix with positive reinforcement, not because positive reinforcement doesn't work, because of the experiences of the horses are, well, so bad, and the situation and the environment is so poisoned that, well, maybe it's too poisoned to make it a good, to change the emotions, and too fragile to get a steady process. And well, 3 years ago, I went to a clinic with another positive reinforcement trainer. It was Mary Concannon from the Irish Clickers Training Center. And I need to load my horse, and I haven't load him for quite a long time. And I think it was one of the worst trailer loading experience we've ever experienced. And it was like, well, if we won't go on the trailer now, we will never go on the trailer again. So after a while, he was on the trailer, and I think my horse is crying, and I was crying, crying in the car. And I drive to the clinic, and I talk with Mary, and even if I just want to train different things, we decide to move on the trailer loading, because I thought after 3 days, I won't get him on the trailer and I can't be going home. And then we start trailer loading again, just from the beginning, as we reteach standing politely next to me, moving forward on a slight use of the rope, and, well, mostly the basic behaviors to walk with the horses, to create a buffer when it comes to trailer loading. And then we use really, really little steps on moving to the trailer with lots of brake. And we really focus if the horse hesitates to react on the cue. So this is something that is really important for me, to have good cues, to recognize if there is hesitation, because this links back to the emotions of the horse. And so this is another puzzle piece for giving the horse choice. We don't always need a start button. If we have good cues, we will easily see if the horse has a problem with the behavior, because when there is no hesitation in our normal work and in a new situation, there is hesitation to react on the cue, there is something happened. So we can use this as information and just go away from the trailer, doing a break, asking for easy behavior in a secure environment. And it took us, I think, just 4 or 5 sessions until he was going on the trailer. And we spent not much time on that, because it was really short sessions, just about 5 minutes maybe, and it was a completely new horse in the trailer. So even if he was on the trailer and we haven't so bad experiences with driving themselves, he was mostly sweating on the trailer and he won't stand there. And I have never had such a quiet home drive, and it was through the hills about 3 hours, and my horse goes out of the trailer totally relaxed when I get back home. So I think this experience was very important for me, to just have the last bit of trust in the science, because after that experience I nearly think everything is possible if we just took the time to really look at the things and how they are going, how the horse is feeling, and if we at least just build it up right from the start and make a new beginning. We can change the horse's emotion due to training if we put the horse's needs first and not train for effectiveness. Yeah. So this was really, really important experience for me, to reteach my horse trailer loading. And then there is another draft horse, so also a draft horse that learns me so many things. I worked with her for many years, and when we are starting work, she only stands on her hind legs, rearing most of the time. And it was very difficult in the beginning, as she didn't know any other way to express her feelings. And she doesn't announce when she will be going up, so it was very dangerous too. And I really think if I want to handle her, because I wasn't so experienced 5 years ago. And the first thing I began to teach her was head lowering as a counter behavior for the rearing. So as long as the head is down, she can't rear. This was what I thought. And when I see any little irritation or even expect she could be irritated by something, I just ask her to lower the head and reward it a couple of times. And this quickly make her recognize that it's much easier and much more effective to lower the head instead of putting lots of energy in rearing. And I was quite impressed by that, because well, this is another puzzle piece of giving the horse the choice to express their feelings in a way that doesn't harm the human. To be honest, this doesn't fix our problem at all, but as she has a lot of things to dealing with her body and mind, but it makes our communication much more easier. And I think we are reaching a different quality of communication. And she learned me another thing too. And as you see, this horse was very important for me too. And well, sometimes my heart counts for draft horses, so maybe this is the reason why I always come to those horses. But when I think of our experiences together, sometimes it felt like we are not going anywhere and haven't reached much with her, as she wouldn't be ridden yet and still suffers with a lot of stress. But when I look back, she learned so much as she learned to cope with our strange expectations for her without being anxious most of the time. And she also can do a lot of behavior on the ground, even more as the Morse horses that are just being ridden. And we need to see what we've reached so far. And we need to accept that every horse is a study of one, like Susan Friedman says. It's not that she is weird or unnormal or something like that. She's just like she is. Many problems we have with horses are, I think, made by our own expectations, because the horse doesn't fit into our own pattern of being normal. So for some horses, just being at our word is a lot of stress, just without teaching them any behavior. Just existing is a stressful thing for some horses. And we need to accept this. And we need to accept that there are good days and better days, and sometimes days that aren't good as others. And sometimes we need to leave it at that. We don't know what's going on in their mind. We can only see the outcome of it. And we don't know what happens the other 22 hours we aren't around them and what affects the behavior. So we need to respect each horse as an individual, and we don't need to push them to limits, which, is even possible with positive reinforcement. Yeah.
I love it. And the first story, I love what you said. You basically, my interpretation anyway, was just when you thought you couldn't trust the science, you learned to trust the science.
Yeah, I always thought I trust the science, but there are just some pieces of the puzzle that aren't found yet. So I think my puzzle is nearly complete, because there are always some puzzle pieces we don't recognize in the edges.
And so potentially find your tribe and get help with those extra puzzle pieces.
Right.
Sadly, though, that does bring us now to our final question for this episode. Sylvia, could you please take us all into the future now and share with us what you would like to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years in the horse and animal training world?
That's quite easy. I would like to see that people are more focused on the way they are teaching behaviors instead of being focused on the outcome. I would like to see that it's about creating and sharing positive experiences and memories and enjoying both the animal and the human, the time they spend together. So it's not about effectiveness and behavior. It's about enrichment and emotional and physical welfare of the animal and, of course, of the human being too. I would like to see that people put their horses' needs and emotions in the first place instead of following only their own expectations and need. And I really hope that we let go outdated systems and beliefs and make the science more important for us. Knowing the science will also help a lot. Even people aren't working with only positive reinforcement, as it will stop them from labeling their animals as stubborn or lazy or other prejudices that won't help explaining them what we like them to do. So this is a new base for understanding behavior and learning and of course, also the emotions of the animal. So hopefully the meaning of respect and trust will change from the horse being afraid of unpleasant consequences and just obey to the human that respects the horse as thinking individual with an emotional life like we have one.
So know and trust the science, find your tribe, and respect and trust and the changing definition of those words.
Exactly.
Perfect. Hey, just before we end, Sylvia, one more time, we've said it earlier in the podcast, but just tell people where they can go to find out more about you, Motionclick, and what you're up to.
If you want to find out more about Motionclick, just go on my website, motionclick.de, or just head up to Facebook and search for my business name, Motionclick, or even for my name, Sylvia Czarnecki. But I think you need to look at the section where all the links are placed, because I think nobody can spell my name right.
It's even harder to pronounce.
Yes, and how to pronounce.
Yeah, we'll make sure we link to all of this stuff in the podcast write-up so it's easy for you to find. Hey, thank you so much for sharing everything today, Sylvia. Not just for coming and hanging out with us. We've been talking and chatting for a couple of hours now, so just recording the podcast and before the podcast, but also for planning this with me and for talking about questions and ideas and all the effort and time and energy you'll put into this project. We really appreciate that. So thank you very much, Sylvia.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to be here and have a talk to you. And I think we have wrapped up great topics to help people to start positive reinforcement or even creating new experiences with their horses. So hopefully this helps someone.
Definitely. Creating ripples, changing the world one podcast at a time, I hope. We do.
Exactly.
Of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about the most positive and less intrusive ways of influencing behavior, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn all about how you can connect with like-minded, positive reinforcement-based animal trainers from around the world. It's like a Netflix social media platform for behavior nerds and geeks. There's something there for absolutely everyone, and we are looking forward to having you join the family. That's it for this episode, though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much for listening, everyone. You'll hear from us again soon.